It's I am very, very, very excited uh, to be here with Mike, Michael Bryzek. Mike is a friend of mine from MIT and an incredible human being overall. Uh, so I feel very fortunate uh, to be um, to be here talking to Mike and um, having a conversation that goes deeper into AI founding and so many more things. So, as we're waiting for people, maybe Mike, you can spend a few minutes just giving a little bit of your background and kind of telling us what you do and what you have done. And well, go ahead
Yeah,
and
great.
tell us a little bit maybe about your life story for those of you know for those of us who don't know you very well.
Thanks for inviting me, Maria. And so nice to meet so many MIT people online and their AI agents that are helping them become better versions of themselves. Uh, my name is Mike Bryzek, class of 99, did my MEng in computer science in 2000. Since then have kind of built a few companies, probably most notably in 2007. We had relocated to New York City, ended up co-founding Gilt Group, Gilt.com, which is a women's fashion company. There's a really funny story about me coming home and sharing with my wife that her MIT nerd was going to build a fashion company. So we can talk about that. Gilt grew very quickly. By year four, we were about I think almost 1,000 people, over 500 million in revenue, and then we expanded internationally. And in the international business, that was a great business for us, selling to customers in other countries. We had it was a really great business, but it was really hard to operate. That led to my setting up a software company in 2015 called Flow Commerce. And at Flow, we help brands sell internationally, essentially taking the learnings that we had growing Guilt and making that accessible to brands of all sizes. I left the business. We sold the business in 2021 to a public company. And particularly this last period, I spend almost my every day with Claude and my various AI team building various products. And I'm just having as much fun as I can remember in my career. It reminds me almost of discovering software at MIT in 1990. I think for me it was January 1996. I still remember IAP 96.
Before we delve deeper into the AI part of what you do, tell us a little bit about, I think you're being very humble by saying that you just build these companies because both of them were unicorns. So tell us a little bit about um, what creates these incredible technologies that make them kind of so extraordinary and why you would, um, like, what brings you those ideas?
So maybe I'll share a little bit more about my early life because I think for me at least it was formative. So I was born in Poland, and when I was 2 years old, my family escaped and came to the United States. Their escape was a just you could make a movie out of the years of planning and orchestration that they had to do. Um, but they eventually escaped to the US. We arrived in New Jersey as immigrants, and 6 months later, my father, who had a PhD in electronics, ended up finding his way to Silicon Valley and was an employee of Fairchild Semiconductors. If you live or know the Bay Area, it's 1979 to commercial grade ultrasound with an iPhone anywhere in the field. And so growing up, I was in this environment of just seeing my parents build companies and come up with ideas and execute on the ideas. He's reading the paper and he puts the paper down. He looks at me and I'm taking a bite of my cereal. He says, "Someday you will build $1 billion company." And then he goes back to, there was no conversation. It was just a statement. And then he goes back to reading the newspaper. So um, certainly for me, I feel like that was the environment I grew up in and ended up knowing intuitively that I wanted to build a company. There's another side of it as well, which like watching my father, I would say he had this ability to think about, see opportunity in the world. And often, at least in the conversations that I would witness, a lot of times he would hear that his ideas were impossible or that can't possibly happen. There's a lot of resistance that he would get to his ideas. And he became kind of like a bulldozer. He just like didn't care when people were saying no, he just ignored them because they clearly didn't know what they were talking about. And today I would say that when we kind of look at the world and we look at the opportunity of making the world a better place, um, we run into these people all the time. That's not possible. It's too hard. Well, actually, you don't know that. there's no way to know if something is impossible. The only thing that we can know is that if we solve the problem, we can prove that it's possible, but it's, it's really hard to prove the inverse. And I think that kind of mindset over just like seeing opportunity in the world, knowing that we can figure out what it would take to solve that problem, but we can go solve that problem for humanity. Kind of that, I feel like I grew up with that mindset. And then to the specific companies, for Guild Group, when I met the Kevin Ryan and Dwight Merriman, who were the original investors in the company, they had this idea to use the internet to launch flash sales of shopping, let's say. And they're basically the premise was for 24 hours, 36 hours, come to this website and you're going to get incredible products at a big discount. And growing up as an immigrant, I really got the idea of shopping at a discount. That's how we shopped. I was a huge shopper at TJ Maxx because you can get clothing and not spend a lot of money. And that idea really resonated with me. And then coming into flow commerce, I would say it's a little bit different. Like I was so frustrated with the vendors that we worked with at Gilt to solve our pain points internationally, just hugely frustrated. They had terrible technology. Our first holiday season, we had 80, our uptime was in the 80th, like 89% uptime. Like what business can operate with like, I mean, three nines maybe, but like 89% uptime. I mean, literally like we were down every single day. So that was frustrating. The integration was frustrating. I got consumed with the idea of just cross-border should be a lot easier. And that led me down the path of, okay, we're going to go solve this problem.
Very cool. And I one of the things you said, and I really want to ask you about that and expand, is you said that you have been coding every day of your life since you discovered it as a freshman. So tell us a little bit about that and how this has shaped your experience now, both throughout MIT, after MIT, and also now with AI.
I just love building software. I find it just very, very fun. That hasn't really changed in 30 years, although having more fun today with AI agents than I think I can remember. How I got into it, I think I actually love this story. So I was a freshman at MIT, and I went back that Christmas, that holiday, I went back to my high school in California and said, "Hey, this internet is happening." So this is December 1995. Netscape came out in 94. It's like our high school needs a website. And we put together a club on campus to build a website for our high school, and that was great. And it was like, and now we need an alumni database so I can personally be involved in this website. And they said, yes, that's a great idea. We just need to find, and that we failed to do in December. So I got back to MIT early January. It's IAP, and I said, you know what? Why don't I just figure out how to build the alumni database myself? So I went to the bookstore and I bought a book. It's called Teach Yourself Perl in 21 Days. And I sat down and I did 2 days of the book in one day at MIT. I then signed up for 6001 thinking, oh, I have this experience now. And I got totally crushed. It was like, I still remember it was one of the hardest classes I ever took at MIT. And I started to question whether or not I would ever be able to pursue a degree in computer science. But really that was kind of the origin. To this day, I'm curious. That book has like, if you look at the reviews are like 2.4 on Amazon. We ended up building a business at MIT. That's how Maria and I met. We worked on that together. We built Volunteer Solutions, which was today you would describe it as a SaaS platform for universities to manage connections between volunteers and the agencies that need their help. We ended up winning the 1998 business plan competition at Sloan. Back then it was 50K. That gave us kind of our start to take this to market. While students at MIT, we recruited, I don't remember the exact number, but one to two dozen of the major universities across America. So I think it was MIT, Harvard, Michigan, Austin, on a long list that were all using our software to manage their. And then eventually we partnered with the United Way in Boston and brought that technology kind of to the country through the United Way system. Was, I think, clear. I've just loved it. As the business grows, though, that creates a challenge because businesses need a lot more than software to operate. As an example, you need management, you need to grow the team, you need hiring. And I'm very thankful that Kevin Ryan at the time saw my interest and essentially helped me solve that problem. And the way that we solved it is we hired a CIO to run the group and then carved out an area where I can continue to contribute in the way that I loved. And in a lot of ways, in that company, a lot of the ways we thought about kind of my role is as the company grew, a lot of times there would be an initiative that was important to the business that maybe was cross-cutting across a lot of departments and people, or and as a founder, kind of a lot of times I could work as an accelerant to accelerate kind of the decision making that needed to happen in order to launch a new product or change direction on something existing in market. At Flow, with the kind of with kind of knowing that experience and kind of my love, I feel very fortunate that as we scaled the business very early, we started recruiting for exceptional management in technology and engineering. And today, actually, the Flow division of our company is run by Sid Jain, who is just an exceptional kind of leader and manager. And when we first started working together, this was an explicit topic of conversations. Just like I know what my strengths are, and I know what I love to do. And ultimately, we worked together for a number of years. Great. I mean, it was amazing. It's one of the highlights of my career. And we just kind of talked openly around what is it that the business needs, what who is going to play what role for the business, and then we gave each other space to do the things that we each love to do.
I have a question for you specifically about Claude, because I know you said that you were blown away by Claude and still are. And so talk to us a little bit about your almost love affair between you and Claude.
So the way I've been approaching AI broadly, and this is over the last maybe almost 2 years now, is I kind of keep a backlog of interesting things that I read about out there that are happening, um, and kind of queue that up to like, let's make some time to explore those things. So I learned about Claude maybe early last year, Claude Code specifically early last year, and kind of put it on my list. Like, I got to take a look at this. And it took me about 2 months to get around to it, but I remember it was a Friday afternoon. It's like, okay, this is my weekend that I've allocated. I didn't allocate a weekend. This is my afternoon that I've allocated to learn and use Claude Code and explore it. By Sunday, I had spent $250 in API credits. And I mentioned that because up until that moment, I was on a $20 a month subscription. And here all of a sudden is this new tool, and within 2.5 days, I've 10x my AI spend. Um, and I was just completely blown away by what they were able to do. Um, and just switched all my activity to Claude. Started exploring the company Anthropic. If there's a great one of my favorite podcasts is this podcast called Acquired, where they tell the stories of iconic companies. Um, and I think it was on Acquired. Now I think it was on the Google episode on Acquired where they talked about where these scientists came from and where these companies came from. Safety has to be the number one priority, not a priority among others, but the first priority. And they're making decisions kind of in that framework. So I kind of fell in love with Cloud Code first, and then I really just when I kind of took a look at the companies in the space, I said, I think these people seem like the best stewards, companies and tools and plugins, and Anthropic really learning how to manage better the context within which these AI agents are working has been just phenomenal. In my circle, I'm curious to hear from folks on the phone. In my circle, people seem to think there was an inflection point around December a few months ago, where things really started to change and change in the way of the Cloud Code has become very powerful, enable in terms of being able to completely deliver work as opposed to presenting work for human review. And in my own work, the way that that has kind of gone is like back in December, I was in a world where the AI was responsible for 99% of the software in the user interface layer. Um, in the back end, I was reviewing everything, and I had this sense of I want to just make sure the data are correct. That's a harder mistake to recover from. And I should say the way I build all my software is kind of contract driven, API driven. So the front end only consumes APIs from a back end. Sitting about a month ago, that changed for me. And I'm now in a world where I don't write code anymore, almost never, very, very rare. And that's happened in this last kind of 3 month period. So with all that said, I just summarize Cloud Code, just an incredible product. And I do feel like we're just sitting on the precipice of an inflection point that is literally happening right now. And it's just amazing to be a part of it. And I find that interesting because ChatGPT primarily is a consumer business from what we can see. They have 900 million weekly active users. what I think the one thing you said that I'll maybe comment on is this idea that fundamentally, like, good people are creating some of the largest valued companies in the world. I think there is truth to that. Um, for myself, I remember a period where I was kind of cynical and I was looking at like a lot of leaders of companies making what to me felt like they tend to have an orientation around just good. I just fundamentally feel that. And recently, I didn't know much about JP Morgan Chase, but I had the pleasure through this acquired podcast to go to their live event last summer, and he was on stage. And listening to him as an example of just making very careful long-term decisions, protecting capital at all costs, being very conservative in all the accounting models, I was like blown away by kind of the quality of the decision making. And I think I tend to agree with you that it is much more common. It may take some work to find those stewards and those people. Um, if I relate it to kind of the MIT experience, I think that is an edge for MIT, where MIT tends to be, in my experience, one of the most positive groups of people that I have ever met, optimistic about the future, collaborative. And I think this group does have the ability to create the best products and companies that the world has ever seen.
I'm MIT all the way, so yes, yes, yes. And I am not going to go down that side note because I'm also slow. So I'm just so not going to answer it because I do want us to focus back on the AI. But let me ask you a question. What surprised you the most about building with AI?
It's just how much fun I'm having. And especially, like for 30 years, I've been building software and I just love it. And now, if you were to look at my job is much more management oriented. I'm managing agents and I'm setting the product and business strategy. And that's much further from the actual like craft of developing software. And I think if you had asked me a year ago, I would say I would probably have less fun doing that work. And I find it's the opposite. I'm having more fun. So I think that's the biggest surprise. And then broadly, I kind of characterize my life today as like I just don't have a to-do list anymore. And I've lived my whole life with like, here's all the things that I've thought of that I want to do that I don't have time to do anything. What that means in practice is now I feel pressure for like I've never felt in my career on the idea generation aspect. Like we really need to generate good ideas now because that's becoming the bottleneck as kind of the execution speed increases or the cost to execution trends. I think it's going to zero. It feels like it's going that way or close to asymptotically to zero. So now it's
Yeah,
like, what's the
definitely.
focus on the idea generation? And one way, like I think about it personally, is I used to, over the last, like over my career, it used to be like I would say that ideas are cheap, execution is everything. And I would say that if you have an idea that's amazing and it's a one in a million idea, well, there's 1,000 people in China that have the same idea as you. So it really is about execution. I think we may be approaching a world where that's changing. And actually, what will become more valuable is the quality of the idea itself. And that, I think, well, I find it like intellectually interesting and it's a completely different skill. Like good ideation and good execution to me feel like very, very different skills to develop.
And in a sense, maybe the clarity of ideas. So not just the good ideas, but kind of the clarities. I always ask myself, what is genius? And I think that the people who are the smartest in the world are people who take incredibly complex ideas and simplify them into words. And I'm like, "Ooh, that's a genius." Yesterday, we had the privilege of talking, and you said that your days now feel like you're onboarding a new person every day. So tell us a little bit about that experience and what you meant.
So when I started working with Claude, I found like I kind of felt I was reflecting on like what does this really like mean and why does it feel different? And where I kind of the best way I could summarize how I felt was I felt like I was onboarding a member to our team, and that member had no ego, so would ask whatever clarifying questions they needed, and there was no power dynamic because that employee wasn't afraid of. There's no struggle around employment or compensation, and what it resulted in is I felt an extreme level of accountability to onboard that person well, which made me, that to me, that was really interesting. Like, why do I feel more accountability to onboard an AI than I did a colleague in my business? Hopefully I don't know what that says about me, but that is how I felt. And where it has led me is like, I feel like my role today is to build tools And that's where I spend most of my day is like, and I think the reason for that is ultimately the product, whether it's built by an AI or a human, has to, I feel accountability that it has to be high quality. So how do I drive high quality when I'm not directly building the product? So that leads me down this path of kind of like, how do we verify the work? And if I don't want to verify the work every time, now I've got to build ways to automatically verify the work. And so that's really kind of where I spend most of my day.
And in a sense, my day job is to be a leadership coach, right? So I I spend a lot of time talking about communication, and
I was just going to comment that I think that has led to a lot of the best practices today working with AIs. It's a multi-step process. That's first, in my world, it's like, let's brainstorm this idea together. Sometimes, by the way, that's a multi-day, multi-week process because I don't feel that we never kind of end up aligning on what I feel is like a good or simple idea. So it can take time. And many times I've abandoned ideas and it's only over months of revisiting that eventually we get to a point where I feel that we have kind of the kernel of the idea that we can action. So there's like a brainstorming element. Then there's a, okay, now we understand what we want to do, like help me design it. And that design, to what you were saying, is a back and forth with the agent, arguably to, uh, in simple terms, to make sure that the agent understands what I want. But I think it's deeper than that. It's like, do I really understand what I want as well? I think it's a two-sided conversation to design. Then we write the plan, and the plan is again a confirmation between the two of us of how we want to approach the problem. And then step three is we actually go and build it. And then step four is we go ahead and verify it. And arguably, back to kind of what you were saying, Maria, is I do feel like it's this conversation with the AI to confirm mutual understanding at each step of the way. And the better we are at confirming the understanding, usually the better the outcome is. And one way that like I think about what the outcome is when we get to time when the AI actually goes and produces its work, is it verified the first time? Like, can we one shot the work, including kind of the verification process? And usually, when I see that happen, it's either a very simple task or it's a result of being taking the time to very carefully confirm kind of mutual understanding of what it is that we're trying to build.
so when you say you verify the AI generated work, how do you verify it? Do you have like a process that you follow? Do you have steps? What is it that you're using in particular?
Yeah, and that I think is a great question. So what I'm doing so far, and I have reasonable results and not great results. So again, this is an opportunity we get into the discussion. I'd love to hear what other people are doing. Um, One of them in my work with kind of API management and APIs between kind of front end and back end servers, or just API platforms in general, that's an area I spent a lot of time in. We have built tooling where we define the API specification in like simple terms. And then we've written a lot of software to co-generate whatever bindings we need for whatever we're working on, whatever languages we're using. And the value there is we can verify the code generation once and trust it. And so a lot of times today, like as a really simple example, it's like, hey, I need you to build an API to accept user registration. Um, there, once the API is specified, um, you can trust that the code that's generated, if it compiles, is likely going to work. Um, And on that, like in programming language choice, I've kind of gone down a path where I think my opinion is that we want to choose the most powerful languages available to give to the AI, because the compiler then will give the AI lots of feedback on whether or not the implementation satisfies the compiler. And compilers are like one of the best tools I think humans have invented for verifying things. So most powerful compiler to me feels like a no-brainer. And I think it's also one of the reasons why we've seen software be kind of the early adopter of like success with AI agents is because you have this extremely powerful verifier. So to move up one level, like one way to do that is to think about what kind of tools can we create that give that push the work to the compiler and let the compiler do as much heavy lifting as possible. Um, the languages that I tend to use today are kind of TypeScript for the front end and Scala for the back end. One thing I love about Scala is it's probably one of the most advanced languages in terms of mathematical set theory. I think it's provably correct in many, many ways. And I just find it just provides great feedback to the AI agent. On that topic of programming languages, I kind of keep an eye to the languages that are being developed now that allow like math that can be verified to be true. with some research languages at Microsoft. There's a language called Lean, which is pretty interesting and again, giving advanced capabilities to verifying the correctness of the software that we write. And I have an opinion that as these languages become more mature, that they may become, again, great tools for AI. Or we'll see a whole new category of like compilers and languages being written that are specifically designed for AIs because they have a different set of needs than humans do. So I think that's kind of an exciting area to watch. And then second, like building one of the very successful techniques I personally have had is to spend some time developing a Claude skill around Playwright. Playwright is a framework for running a headless browser that can verify functionality in the browser. And a lot of the applications, all the applications I work on run in the browser. Um, and with and Playwright itself, you can write those tests in TypeScript. So again, feedback to the compiler. But simply like including in the like overall workflow, you must create Playwright tests and run them in including kind of in all of the work. Um, and then I would say the where like I'm kind of struggling today is on I haven't found like a good way to get an interactive loop going in the AI around like visual design and UX improvements. So I'm curious if others have found a way to actually make that work. But it feels like it would be possible to say, run the playwright test that we just wrote in the browser. It already has the capability of taking screenshots and now set up an iterative loop to kind of review the screenshots and generate. Third is in a lot of these workflows, it's relatively simple today to set up review processes with other agents, and they're kind of using a different model actually provides like a different set of eyes and a different perspective. And that's actually very, very useful a lot of times then consider it. And then the final category, something that I've seen my friends doing in industry, which I haven't personally yet done, is there's a lot of work going into these um, eval frameworks. So defining a set of evals so that when models evolve, you have a way of objectively recording whether or not you think the model has gotten better or worse at a particular task. And I've seen that particularly in like more mature software where you really want to avoid a regression, really capturing kind of the essence of what you value, I think is really, really important. Um, I haven't yet seen, and in these eval frameworks that I've seen, a lot of times they're automated. So you run through your kind of questions, and then you ask a quorum of models to evaluate that response relative to your benchmark. And then you can kind of get an automated view of, where are the regressions with this new model. But still, today I see that that still requires a lot of like human input and human work to then kind of verify the correctness before kind of that new model is pushed to production or the users.
And as you're speaking about I guess you spoke about the workflow, and I wonder if you can give us a little bit more of a specific example of what you mean by that.
There so the best actionable advice I can give on that is Boris, is the creator of Claude Code, has a very active Twitter account, X account. Follow him. He recently posted a screenshot of his Claude.md file. So the Claude.md file is the standard in Claude Code. So when you fire up an agent, it looks for a file called Claude.md in the working directory, and if it's there, it reads it. And in there, you basically define the I would uh, bookmarks for the AI to get the information that it needs. But one of the key things is like, here are the steps that you must follow when we're developing software together. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Merge it into my Claude.md, and I kind of took his workflow and orchestration steps. In there, there's an interesting technique, which is when I started working on this, I kept updating my Claude.md file. And the way I would do it is, okay, so I would work with Claude, it would do something. And in the early days, I didn't like what it produced. So the way that I approached that problem is I would push Claude's code to Git, and then I would refactor it until I was happy. When I was happy, I'd go back to Claude and say, Git diff my work against yours, extract the learnings, and write them as a new rule for how to develop software in the future. And then that technique converges pretty quickly, where Claude learns your preferences around software development. Over time, what happens is now my Claude.md file gets really large. And as as we start to, if we put too much into the context for the AI, generally speaking, the probability of it drifting or the quality decreasing, it's more likely that the quality will decrease if our context window is filled with stuff that's not relevant to the task at hand. So then managing the window becomes a priority. And one of the techniques for managing the window is rather than including all the information, just include a summary of where that information lives and a pointer to where Cloud can go get it. And so now today, when I look at my Claude.md file, it's fairly high level in terms of here's exactly the workflow that you must follow. And here are some links in case you're doing work with Scala or UI or visual design or you're planning. And then those other documents will fill in additional context. And the agent is pretty good at figuring out when it needs to go collect more context and specific context for the task at hand. Over time, what has happened in the cloud ecosystem is they initially had cloud.md and then they had rules and they had agents, which is just like ways of organizing different like prompts for different tasks. Then they developed skills. Skills are awesome. You can write a skill for anything, planning, brainstorming, designing, architecting, visual design. There's a popular open source skill for building a presentation. I think it's called front end slides or something like that. But it's the context for that skill. And by the way, I saw you shake your head. If you've never used front end slides, it's amazing. I have stopped
Oh,
using PowerPoint. Claude writes all my slides using the front end um, slide skill. And then Claude introduced plugins, and plugins are a way for people to very easily share essentially these skills with each other. And you can install them directly within Claude. Um, and It kind of puts, if you install it, it'll put Claude into this mode where even if you don't go through the design plan build phase, Claude will start asking you the questions it needs to go through that phase to create a clear plan to be able to action against. So I highly there's just and the most recent plugin that I've been playing with, which I think has been quite positive, is called Claude Memory. And so the idea with Claude Memory is at the end of every session, this plugin latches onto a hook from Claude to say the session ended. It then takes all the conversation in the session and I think the artifacts that are produced, and it uses the AI to summarize the session. It stores the details in a database on your local device, in my case, and then it summarizes what that session was about. Then when Claude
oh,
starts on the next session, it actually like generates a table of contents of recent work. And interestingly, for each headline, it shows you like, hey, Claude, if you're interested in learning more about this, it's going to cost you this many tokens. Um, and now that information is like present so that when you are working with Claude in a future session, Claude can decide if what you're asking about, it would be helpful to go get context from prior work. And then it can bring that prior work directly into scope and solve this problem of really the AI starting fresh with no knowledge of what we worked on before. And amazingly, like in my own work, one of the things that this kind of setup has produced is one of good advice for the AI is like before you work, go explore the code base for similar implementations. And if you find them, then if I ask Claude to go work on something, Claude will scan the table of contents to see if it's something that we've worked on. And if it catches a glimpse of, hey, we worked on this yesterday, it will actually go back, refresh its memory on what we worked on, and then take that context into continuing the task, which has been just incredibly powerful. Um, yeah,
I
it,
one thing that I have found with the AI in general is like it gets smarter the longer you play with it, the longer you're partnering. It's like I and I do have to admit, until we talked like a few weeks ago, I had been using OpenAI, right? So ChatGPT, and so when you mentioned Claude, I said, okay, fine, I'll switch, right? And I sometimes have to go back to Open AI to ChatGPT simply because it doesn't know me, and I'm like, okay, design this for me, and then I go back, right? And wow, that will solve like a really big problem I've been having. Um, Tell us a little bit about OpenClaw as well.
yeah, and just very briefly within Claude, I gave a
Oh yeah,
presentation
yeah,
last week,
yeah.
a
Please
working
go.
presentation last week to a group of friends, and I shared three things. We started with Claude Code, and we built a feature, and I wanted to do that because even though this was a non-technical audience, The strategy, I think, is the same. Design, plan, implement. Then we went to Claude Cowork. Claude Cowork is Claude's kind of UI that lets you start Claude in a folder, very similar to how Claude Code works, but so it's accessible for non-technical people. And what's really important about that is if you open Claude inside a specific folder, you can just ask Claude to read the files in the folder to understand context. And as a really simple example, we were working on my wife and I run a hackathon at the local high school, and we were working on our press strategy. The reason it was amazing is I didn't have to tell it everything because it could just read everything in the local file system. So I'm a big fan of like using tools like Claude Cowork to work in a local folder. And then our job is to create documents in that folder to guide Claude to do the type of work or the quality work that we want. And it's repeatable because those files exist beyond a conversation. Um, and then you mentioned we talked about Open Claw, CLAW. And I guess the story I would tell is built been the CTO building a few different large companies, and I would hire engineers and product designers and visual designers to work with me to build the products that we were building. Um, Today, I have a bunch of digital employees instead because I don't need to hire people to help me do the work. I have Claude is my software engineering team manager, dispatches many agents to work on that. We've talked a lot about that. And then I have my digital AI assistant, who I lovingly named Athena. And Athena, I built using OpenClaw in 2 hours. And Athena is I would call her chief of staff. And I can talk to Athena I chose WhatsApp. You can talk, there's like 50 different connectors. And so Athena and I spend the day chatting on WhatsApp when I'm away from my desk to coordinate the work of Claude and the team. And it's really just amazing because now I have 24/7 access to build software. OpenClaw, CLAW, is an open source project that went viral a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago. And it was created by a
A few weeks.
and it is this tool that a non-technical person built, which is also like kind of amazing. And the way I would describe it is you give it full access to your computer and it does amazing stuff with AI for you. And you don't have to be technical to do it. So it's an amazing, super powerful tool. And we should remember with great power comes great risk. So it could really, if your computer gets hacked or if you guide it off the guardrails, there's danger there. By the way, on that point, I ordered a Mac Mini, as many people have done. There is a delay in producing the Mac Minis, I think, for this use case. So I'm waiting to receive it. But the strategy is run Athena 24/7 on a sandbox physical machine without access to my bank accounts or my credit cards to try to get a little bit more safety in there. Um, but once you install OpenClaw, then it'll say, what would you like to call me? That's where I named it Athena. And then it's like, what would you like to do? And I said, I'd like to build a digital assistant. And and so it's like, well, what would you like your digital assistant to do? And this is chat interface. I said, I don't know. What do you think a digital assistant should do? And so we kind of ideate together. But within 2, 3 hours in the first day, every morning now I wake up and I have an email. And that email says, here's the weather. Here's a dad joke that you haven't heard before. I went through your email. Here are the emails that require a response. For each of those emails, I click a link and I go to the draft of the response. That response was drafted using a voice study that we did. The voice study, I had asked Athena to read the last 1,000 emails that I had sent and categorize them by professional, administrative, or personal, and then analyze each set of emails to develop a voice prompt for that category. So the draft replies are now written in my voice. And I've used a lot of these tools, by the way, and most of the time, quality is the problem. The quality here is exceptional, is blown away. So much so that on Tuesday, I responded to an email, and then Athena drafted a response after I had responded. And I read the draft, and the draft was better. It had highlighted an important question I had forgotten to ask. I had to follow up on my email to ask the question that I should have asked at the beginning. So the quality is exceptional. Then I get my calendar. Then I get my open pull request in GitHub. And then really interesting, and this is where I'm spending a lot of my time today, is I asked it to go through my five main software projects that I'm working on, and for each one to generate an idea, and then design, plan, and implement it, and leave me a link to the pull request. So I wake up every day with five pull requests to review, one for each software project. The first day we got really simple things, like I fixed the comment. What do we need to do? And Athena said, well, of course we would be more ambitious. I don't know anything about your strategy. And I said, well, what do you need to know? And Athena gave me a list of like 30 questions. And I was like, oh my, that's a lot of typing. I don't feel like typing that much. And Athena said, well, just go to WhatsApp, hit the voice recorder, and just talk to me. And so that's what I did. And now Athena from that built kind of translated my words into a product and business strategy for the software. And now we're incorporating every morning. It's like read the strategy for the product, generate an idea, and go ahead and like open up a pull request. And where that has now, there's kind of two interesting things where maybe we can go from here. One, like I'm now really interested in this like fully autonomous, like what can we do to have this become fully autonomous? Like finish the code review, deploy the software to production, and then go generate another idea and just get on that flywheel. And then second, it was really interesting to work with OpenClaw. I highly recommend it if you haven't already, just because for me, it showed, it highlighted for me that at the end of the day, one of the most important things we're doing here is building these continuous workflows with AI. And really, it's just about task orchestration. It's like really, really simple. Come up with an idea, perform a task, evaluate whether the task is done. If it's not done, try again or continue, and ultimately get to a point where the task is done and today ready for human review. But that's really all that OpenClaw is doing. And I'll give you a really simple example. I saw in my town's Facebook that if you don't want the town gazette anymore delivered to your porch, you can call this phone number and request to have them skip delivery to your home. I was like, great, Athena, call this number and cancel my newspaper delivery. And Athena said, I don't know how to make phone calls. I was like, well, what do you need to make a phone call? And Athena came back and said, sign up for this service and give me the API key. So I signed up for the service and gave her the API key. And she said, thank you. I've called the newspaper to cancel your subscription or your delivery. And in that, it's just this like, it's really, I was just like, that's amazing.
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm just curious about OpenClaw. I haven't had as good experiences with it yet. Maybe I need to give it a second shot. What LLM are you using underneath the hood with OpenClaw? And like, what's your OpenClaw budget for API usage?
Sorry, you made me laugh. Great questions. So, okay. I think everyone should be using Claude. If you're not using Claude, you're really making a mistake. With the one exception, if you're doing multimodal stuff, video and that sort of thing, I think Gemini still has an edge. I Full disclaimer, I have invested in Anthropic. So I have a vested interest, but I was saying that before I was an investor, and it's why I invested. The reason for it, at the end of the day, what I found is I find the structure of logic in Claude is exceptional. And I think I trained as a software engineer. When I was hiring software engineers, I would interview for logic. That was the one skill I felt was a predictor of quality. And I think that applies to kind of all the industries. And so I just find the ability to generate quality just higher with Claude. When I got into Claude, my first weekend, I spent $250 myself in Claude Code. And then I was up to like $1,000 before I discovered the $200 plan. So now I'm like $200 a month in Claude Code. With OpenClaw, my first 3 days, I spent $250 again on the API usage. What I'm trying to do now is I found a way to instruct OpenClaw, and that seems to let me like take advantage of my subscription without, you know, taking all my money.
Yeah, so you're
And
expecting it'll still end up like at $10, $20 a month for OpenClaw to use Claude API?
Well, yeah, I don't know where it's going to end. What I find interesting is it's probably 100 times cheaper than hiring people, maybe
Right.
more. And so like the value question, like I feel like the model companies have a lot of room to increase pricing to get closer to value. And luckily we have competition in the sector where it seems to be, preventing that at the moment. But I kind of think about it more from kind of the value orientation. And if I were running a company, everyone would be on the $200 a month plan in the company. There's no question. And the way that we would fund it is we would just reduce headcount by one person. In a 100-person company, you can do the math. Just don't hire one or two, reduce headcount by 1 or 2% and give everyone unfettered access to AI and your budget neutral and your productivity positive. It's really, really a simple equation. I just find it a really simple equation.
Perfect. Thank
And
you.
Raj, and you're on mute, Raj.
Okay. Hi, Michael. I read somewhere on an AI powered pickleball scheduling uh, tool. I'm a pickleball coach, founder of a pickleball team
pickleball.
in India.
Did you say pickleball? Sorry, your
Yes,
audio is coming in
sorry.
real. Okay, sorry. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's about to rally. Yeah, it's a pickleball game scheduling tool that Michael's working on.
Are you asking
So
me to
I
just share a little bit about Rallied
Yes, yes.
love this.
life or about the things that are important to me? There's not a lot there. Um, one of my recent passion projects, let me back up. My wife and I discovered pickleball a couple of years ago, and we have just fallen in love with the sport. And it is something that we chose to learn and do together. So today we actually get to go play pickleball 2, 3, 4 hours a week together, which is just added to our marriage. And and as we improved our skill level in pickleball, and this happens to basically everyone, you start preferring the games that you set up yourself with your friends. And in our case, it's people of competitive skill. It'll coordinate schedules, but importantly, after every game, you'll get a link to privately review the other players. And the AI will learn who you like to play with. We maintain an AI compatibility score between all the players so that if I want to play tomorrow at 3, I can just go to Rally D and say, get me a game tomorrow at 3. Rally D will figure out the players, text them to see who's available, and like set up the game for me with people that I love to play with. So anyway, it's out there. It's free. You're welcome to use it.
I'll apply to my club. I have a 50 member club that I founded in Germany.
That's amazing, Raj. What I am
Yeah, yeah.
exploring, by the
Thanks.
way, is I'm exploring if there is an opportunity to turn it into a business serving clubs. And the use case would be let the AI just fill your unbooked court time with players who love being with each other. So I would love to collaborate on that with you if you're interested.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. Maybe, yeah, I'll write to you. Okay.
I would
Yeah,
welcome that.
I
Hi, Michael. Thanks again. Really great talk. One question I had, I mean,
Welcome,
as an
welcome.
MIT alum, yeah. So my question is more on, especially with something like OpenClaw, right? Like you're talking about, it can be governance can be an issue, especially because it's quite open. Could do a lot of things if you don't set up proper guardrails. Have you considered like how to structure your guardrails around OpenClaw? Does system dynamics play a role in that, in setting policy, for example? And could you almost architect the governance into OpenClaw itself using modeling of that nature?
It's a good question. There are a few other projects like OpenClaw that focus on this aspect of governance and security. Um, my opinion, though, is it's exactly the lack of safety and security that makes OpenClaw useful. So I haven't had a temptation to go explore these other projects. If I were to predict where this all goes, the person who created OpenClaw was recruited and hired by Sam Altman into OpenAI. And I think that gives us a hint that this level of power is exactly the type of thing that the frontier model companies want to deliver to customers, but they want to deliver it in a much safer way. And I would imagine that they are working on exactly kind of this question and product that you're describing. Um, in my own world, the more practical issue I see with OpenClaw is it's actually not that reliable. So, as an example, today in my morning briefing, it gave me 4 software suggestions, but not 5. And so and that and I've been thinking about that problem as maybe maybe I should build my own version of OpenCloud now that I understand that the important construct is task orchestration, reviewing a task output, checking in on a task, being able to submit a continuation task. That's really all OpenClaw is. And so I've been thinking about should I just go do that and explore that space? And if I were to go down that path for myself, then I would have direct control over kind of the permissions and what is actually allowed. Interestingly, I just had lunch with two other founders last weekend. Small, right? You can literally download OpenClaw's code base, have Claude read it, and then within, yeah. Um, One thing we didn't talk about, one of the other, it kind of in the, I think the more probably professional space. I work today on a lot of smaller projects, and I like microservices anyway, so my software never ends up getting quite large. Um, if you can fit all your software in the context window of a particular LLM, like that in itself is already a big advantage. And there's this other problem of like, how do you structure these things when um, we can talk about that as well if you like.
Much appreciated. Yeah, I think I could keep going, but yeah, another workshop on this. I got my Mac Mini. It's probably not the high power that you're going for, but something to get started with.
That actually is, I think, the computer of choice right now, because if you think about what these things are doing, they're making API calls. That's it. It's just I/O.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. And Luke, do you want to go ahead?
Sure thing. Hey Michael, yeah, thanks so much for all the insights. So we're actually building AI infrastructure, but I feel like I'm still trying to even adjust my mental model, right, of like just how good I think these agents and LLMs have gotten over the last few months. And so I'm curious, like, how you think about right, either today or in like, I guess maybe a couple weeks, a month from now, right? Like what types of like how do you think about what can an open claw setup handle and what it can't handle? And right, like how do you like go about kind of segmenting that?
Well, maybe one way to think about it is there was a classic paper from, I think, Andreessen decades ago that software will eat the world. And we've kind of seen that play out where software is playing an increasingly large role and already a large role in almost every part of the economy. And if we think about OpenClaw as an orchestrator of software, then one answer to the question is like basically OpenClaw can do everything. Where the gap, I think the biggest gap comes down to robotics, because we don't yet have robotics that have the tactile control that is needed for a lot of things that people do. But you can make the hypothesis that the advancements in AI will accelerate the creation of kind of tactile robots, and kind of that leads to a path where, over a period of time and possibly in our lifetime, I kind of subscribe to the hypothesis that maybe there won't be, maybe AI will actually be able to do everything, and that of course begs all sorts of other questions. Um, so I do think it's incredibly, I think it's incredibly powerful and really hard to imagine where those limits are. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think one way that I've seen people frame, and I've kind of think about it the same way, is like think about OpenClaw as like almost like a employee equivalent, right? Like a junior or like a mid-level type of employee, that like certainly still makes mistakes, right? Sometimes it gets confused or like it starts hallucinating, right? And sometimes it just like forgets things. Serious impact, right, to like the workforce and society, where it's like, even if that replaces like 50% of junior to mid-level folks. That is like unemployment levels like we've never seen before. Um, and I think it's kind of a double-edged sword of like one hand, it's super exciting that you now have these essentially, employee equivalents that will work 24/7, never gets sick, right? Doesn't have an ego that you need to manage. But at the same time, like, yeah, serious implications to think about.
Yeah. So two things I would say to that is I think of OpenClaw primarily, the biggest benefit I get from it is being able to like talk to it on my phone. Like, I really like boil it down. And so I think about it much more as a chief of staff as opposed to a junior employee, like
Mm,
orchestrating work for on my behalf. Um, and on the human intelligence side, your comment made me think about like humans also, how do humans end up making high quality decisions? And in one of the things that in the venture capital industry, which I find valuable, is as a founder, you have to go raise venture capital. And usually that process means you have to go talk to a lot of people at different venture companies to try to like find somebody who's interested in your thesis. And that process usually, most of those people tell you no and tell you if you're lucky, like why they think what you're doing is not going to be successful. And so that process of like refining our own judgment happens naturally in venture, as opposed to a CEO of a company just deciding to enter a vertical almost unilaterally. And I find that in the process of raising money, I find helps us make better judgments personally. That's a hypothesis. I don't have data to prove it. If it were true, then in the AI world, it's really just designing systems that model that. What are the systems that humans have that lead to better judgment? And can we model those for AI agents to go through the same process? And certainly we're seeing some of that with like, using multiple models and whatever else. But I think we're going to continue to see innovation there that's going to continue to drive up the quality of the judgments that the AIs make. And then on the existential threat, like I go through periods where I'm terrified. And the way like I personally just come to terms with it is um, a few things. If you zoom out macro, every technology enhancement and revolution that we've seen is really just there to continue GDP growth. Like you don't really see revolutions in GDP growth. And what we've learned, there's a great book called I think Super Forecasters, which I learned from a world champion in poker around like how do you learn to make high quality decisions? And the book is amazing if you don't know it, but essentially the best forecasters they ran a global competition around like forecasting geopolitical events, like what's the probability that North Korea invades South Korea in the next 5 years? And then they gave a period of time to form your opinion, and then they measured people based on what actually happened. And the best forecasters would always use history as a starting point and then make small adjustments based on what happened in the world. So macro level, probably that's what's going to happen. Uh, the flip side for me is I also feel like Pandora's box has been opened here. And it is a national arms race. There's no chance. I wasn't alive during the beginning of the Cold War, but I think that's the best analogy. Therefore, investment is going to continue very aggressively in this industry. And I feel like the choice that I get to make personally is to participate or ignore. And I'd rather participate and use that as a way of learning. And so that's broadly how like I've kind of tried to rationalize the fear that I feel.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you for that.
And Mike, can I jump in and ask you a question? Do you find that speed? So, how do you avoid shallow building? So, um, does speed require more discipline, less discipline? Like, so when you produce something, when you build something, like you're building tools, right? And some of them are just like surface level, some of them can go deeper and deeper. So, how do you do that?
What I, what I guess today what I would say is the tools that I'm building, I'm an active user of, or the products, ultimately the products that I'm building, I'm an active user, and I have maybe learned to be hyper aware of the edges of things, and so I pay a lot of attention to my use of the tools and my day to day, and I kind of use that to inform like where do we need to go. What would be like a simple example is there's a great book, and I think the Everyday Design of Simple Things, it's not quite the right title, but it really talks about the design of artifacts in the real world. And as an example, if you go up to a door and it has a push plate and you push it, it should open. And if there's a handle, you should pull it. Sometimes you go to a door that has a handle and you pull it, and it turns out you have to push the handle. Like that's a design mistake, and it should be fixed. So I try to stay hyper vigilant around the things that could be better around me in my everyday life and use that as a guiding principle to bring back into the product. And usually I find that that's like a way of calibrating like deeper into whatever space we're going. I don't know if that really makes sense. In my Rally D product, as an example, we need you to consent to SMS to be able to send you a text message to ask if you can play tomorrow. And if you don't respond, it's harder to schedule games with you. So eventually, that was kind of annoying. Now I get a message like Maria did not consent. Click here to, and it pre-populates your messages app on your iPhone to so that I can send you personally a message like Maria, please say yes because I want to play games with you. And we try to like automate the workflow of getting your consent down to where it's like on that specific feature, it's a pretty deep like. So I
Mm.
don't know if that really answers your question, but if not,
Um, I think in a sense, kind of like what you're saying is so far you haven't attempted to go into like big enterprise products, for example, or
Oh, from that perspective.
mm,
Um, yeah, I haven't worked on a large code base, if that's what you mean. But I think from what I've been learning from my friends is they're really spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to modularize the code base such that any particular area of the code base can fully fit into the context window of the model that they're using to minimize the drift. And so for some of them, that means kind of like a large refactoring. Um, and then one thing that people, I think I have been, again, this is from close friends that they've been sharing is if you just let the AI build the software, the AI will create a lot of duplicate software. So the idea of modularization and building reusable components, those principles are not by default what the models are going to do. And so I actually also spent quite a bit of time on that problem, which is like trying to guide the AI to create reusable components. One technique that I've been using, and there are some skills and plugins from Anthropic and others that can help with this, but just having the agent autonomously, continuously reviewing to extract components into reusable pieces. Like I'm doing that work continuously with my agents to try to like reduce the size of the code base to again like leverage keeping being able to fit more of the relevant code base in context for whatever the future task is.
um, and as you're saying this, and maybe I'm gonna ask you what I understand, and that's from, we all hear
Yeah.
from our perspective. So remember that my undergrad was in mechanical engineering, and we used to have, and I was specializing in manufacturing, and we used to talk about just-in-time manufacturing and agile manufacturing. So in a sense, um, we've, like in manufacturing, we found out that um, this is more of an agile kind of build.
Yeah, we my career has been very very deep into Agile, very deep. Yeah, and I think a lot of the software industry, at least what I've seen, has moved into that direction. About 20 years ago, there was a seminal paper from or article from Etsy's head of operations that really moved the industry away from creating these big monolithic software releases to releasing all the time and small incremental changes. At Gilt Group, we were releasing software probably 100 times a day. At Flow, probably 50 to 100 times a day. And it's just this continual release process. Um, anyway, if folks are interested, I have another talk on that. I'll put the link in chat on how we build software.
The the topic of today's talk was building at the speed of light, and I got inspired by this because it's almost like suddenly like and what you're describing is as soon as you have an idea, it gets done, right?
Yeah,
It used to be. I remember those times, right? When, I used to hire people over and over again. Like I will hire like 3 or 4 people in parallel doing the same thing, hoping one of them will come up with something that I had in my mind, right? And now it feels like this is happening. So
I think what you just said is a nugget of gold, and I just want to repeat it back because it's something I hadn't considered before. But this idea that we can, for any given idea, we can ask the agents we can ask two, three, multiple agents to go design and implement it autonomously. I think is really interesting, and I actually am going to go explore that. Um,
oh,
the
cool.
and the reason for
That
that,
sounds
what it makes me think about is it would be super interesting if we ended up with three different implementations, or maybe even like three different designs, because now the workflow could be a fleet of autonomous agents coming up with designs, a set of agents reviewing the designs and converging on the best, and then rinse and repeat, do that for the plan, rinse and repeat, do that for the implementation. I think that would result in a better outcome, and I find that really interesting. On the building fast, one thing that's really fun is um, over the years I've kind of built a personal expense and budget management application for my family, and then today I sent my kid a photo. I was like, "Your feature request is in production."
Uh, can I ask you about the democratization of AI? And again, if people want to ask
Yeah,
questions, please post them. We do have we are scheduled for another 8 minutes, so I'm going to keep asking questions until somebody asks a question. So if you do want to ask a question, please feel free to raise your hand. Um, and I know some people already are sending me messages that they had to jump off. But the Um, what was the question?
Yeah,
Oh, the democratization.
democratization.
Go ahead.
Uh, the, I just feel blessed in my life to have discovered software. And it is this, I don't know how best to describe it, but software lets one create, ideate, and deliver products and value to ourselves and our friends and others in the world. And it's one of the most fulfilling like cycles I could imagine. Um, and now the hurdle to building software was relatively high. And I feel like that is being brought to zero. Companies like Lovable, Vercel's got V0. We see non-technical people now being able to build products. My partner in my last business, um, extremely smart man, very logical. He just sent me a link to an app that he built with Claude Code last week. And so, like, what does the world look like if a billion people now have the ability to create the tools and products that they need to improve the communities that they're in? I think that's an incredibly exciting time and opportunity ahead of us. And I know there are a couple of questions, so I'll pause there.
Because Shiva is one of the founders and admin to the community, so I'm gonna be a
Thank you,
little
Maria. I
bit.
really appreciate it. Michael, I got to jump. I think this was very fascinating because I come from the world of software. I've been building for 27 years, right? From Fortran, from punch cards. I'm that old. I also worked for Microsoft for 3 years, and Bill Gates talks a lot about software in the early days. And so my question is, do you think Claude or any of the other tools that you're using can generate a new language? If you remember, like, I don't know if you remember the language, like we had Lisp and Prolog in the
Hmm.
early days of rule-based expert systems. Those
Um,
those those were
I mean,
AI-centric languages.
yeah, I mean, I would think so. Um, I guess the way I would think about it is like when we think about programming languages, they have like this dual purpose of being able to be written and read by humans and being able to instruct a machine to do things. And one could argue that the human interface is no longer a
Mm,
requirement.
mm,
And Elon Musk is famous for like just challenge the requirements. And I think there is an opportunity to challenge the requirement of the human interface aspect of programming languages. And so then if we were to remove that requirement, I could easily imagine that the thing that we created would be significantly different from what we have today and probably have some really interesting properties that may be beneficial. And so then in that world, that certainly is a world that I think is worth exploring, and it'd be very, very
mm.
interesting to see where it came out.
Jump because I
Uh,
have a meeting now, which I
oh,
have to attend. And
the real world calls. Send your digital.
techniques that you have covered in this discussion could really work and get this product out, let's say within 3 or 5 months.
What is ESG?
This sustainability. That's environmental, social and governance uh, management. You like that means we cover things like carbon footprints, measurement, HR policy, and governance,
Yeah.
corporate governance. Yeah.
Well, I certainly am bullish on these product tools and products. They're amazing. So the short answer to your question is yes, but 3 to 5 months feels like an eternity. It seems crazy, so long. The challenge in all of these things is not the technology, it's the people and the processes that are in place that kind of inhibit product from being developed quickly. The culture of the organization to just embrace these tools. Um, and what I see happen is people are quick to judge. They're like, I asked it to build something and it didn't do exactly what I wanted, or there was a defect or whatever. And instead the mindset that I took is this is a very powerful tool. Very powerful tools all in my entire life have always required an investment to learn how to use. In this case, the investment is large, but if we make the investment, it's going to pay great dividends down the line. And so that's kind of how I think about it. And also, I believe today that it is user error if you don't get the intended outcome. The tools are powerful enough that you can, in fact, deliver whatever you want. So with that mindset now, if we can get that mindset adopted It's like, let's just go do this with Claude. And then when problems arise, because it's not a miracle, we're going to work through and learn and address those problems in a meaningful way. And I believe you could you if one were to adopt that, the results would speak for themselves.
Okay, thank
And
you. And
yeah,
is
Cloud,
cloud configurable for observability?
100%. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
When I have
Yeah.
when I have a production issue, I don't do anything anymore. It's like, Claude, go figure out what happened. Go get all the logs, look at it. Oh, you didn't get good enough logs? Fix the logging system so next time we're going to have better data. I don't do anything.
Okay.
I am just
Okay.
instructing the AI to go work.
Okay.
um, and
Right.
can I make an observation? In what you said, I understood something. You said you have yourself a very low ego. And I believe that's why you came up with the idea that AI has a very low ego as well. Because and I feel it's almost like you're bringing your personality to the agents that you're building. I I heard the higher power CEO that's arguably not exactly a nice person, and she said, "Oh, my AI is a bitch," and I was thinking,
That's funny. Yeah.
and always in awe of you. I've always been. So again, thank you everyone for being here. Mike, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Maria, and thank you everyone for your great questions. This
Yeah.
is really
Thank
fun.
you.
Take care, everybody.